Hello. So, not that long ago, I released a video on how to fix problems with your knees, or rather, how to prevent knee problems in regards to martial arts practice. And that was really well received. I released it as a public lesson. So today I'm going to do a video that's kind of like a follow-up video for other issues that could happen during practice or any kind of work-related injury. So particularly, I'm going to be going over some issues with the back and one possible way that you could get back problems. So this is not all back problems, but one particular that I have experience with that I managed to fix with these couple exercises. So I hope this will help you in any way, shape, or form, and if not, maybe help someone you know. So anyway, when I was working in a factory and also doing martial arts practice as well, I was working as a material handler where I was basically pushing around thousands of pounds of steel around all day. It was like a drive shaft factory, so lots of steel, lots of like pallet jacking things around, and very heavy lifting, a lot of manual labor. And during that time, I found that I was very tight in a particular area, and specifically in a imbalance of tightness. So when we talk about the back, we usually think about the back itself, but one area that we can have tightness that can cause back issues that we don't normally think of is in the glutes. So when I was figuring out this problem, it was actually when I started learning to stretch before I starting working, and then after working, and sometimes in between, I was trying to fix myself because I was having some lower back issues. And I found that actually stretching my glutes was the most effective thing. Because what essentially happened is whenever I was like pushing things with the pallet jack, I'd essentially always push from one side to the other to get it started, and then once the momentum gets started, you can kind of keep pushing it along. But what it ended up doing is that one glute would be a little bit tighter than the other because I was always using it a little bit more than the other. And as we know, with developing any kind of muscle, the more you use it, the more the muscle shrinks. And especially if you're not doing any kind of relaxing exercises, you can end up shrinking it and then tightening it, and that can cause imbalance. So if I have one muscle, so say my bicep, for example, I train it well, I train it every day. So that's going to shorten, right? If I don't train my tricep, and that's just going to pull on my bicep's going to pull, which is going to pull on my elbow joint. But this muscle right here, the triceps, is not pulling in equal amounts to your bicep, which means that your elbow, like if it's here, is going to be pulled on unevenly. It's going to kind of put it out of whack, and is kind of what we talked about in the video with the knees in regards to the inner and outer thigh. So what happened here was that one glute was tighter than the other. So it'd shrink while the other one wasn't shrinking to the same amount. And it was essentially pulling my coccyx like this. And it's like a really small change. You don't really think about it, which is why I want to emphasize it. So just that little bit just caused the coccyx to go like this, which of course the coccyx is directly linked to your lower spine, which then will cause the spine to essentially bow like this. So it would cause an imbalance there. And that's obviously what was causing my back issues. So it's a really not as commonly thought about way of developing back issues. So I'm going to show some exercises to stretch the glutes in order to alleviate these kind of issues. And I actually did fix my back problems doing this. I was about a couple years into that factory job, and then afterwards I started doing these stretches, and for the next year, no back issues since then. So for the first exercise, depending on your flexibility level, you can do this one of two ways. You can do this like seated cross-legged like this, or if you're like me and have a little bit more extra flexibility to work with, you can work in half lotus, where you essentially just stack one leg on top of the other like this. The important part of this is the positioning of your leg. So if I just take this and put my leg back behind me like this position right here, where my leg is working at a parallel to the floor here, is causing my thigh bone to rotate, which is pulling and stretching along the glutes. So if I face you here, if I'm just like this, right, my thigh bone is completely facing and like my knees pointed up. But by rotating my thigh, now my knee's pointed that way, and now it's pointed towards the camera here. So this rotation is the first part of the stretch. The second part is in the lengthening and then the stretching downwards of my torso. So to do this correctly, I don't want to bow my back like this and bend forward. Doing so actually makes you think you're more flexible than you actually are, as a way to cheat, as a way to actually develop back problems because you're bowing your back. So I want to think my spine is like a rod. I want to maintain that rod. So whenever I bend forward, I want to bend from the coccyx and bend forward like so until we can comfortably get to the floor, or however far you can, right? So if this is as far as you can go, or this is as far as you can go, that's fine. And of course, when you get down to like this level, of course there's going to be a little bit of bend. That's okay. You can't actually stretch through your legs. It's not physically possible. So it's gonna have a little bit of leeway, right? So make sure that you think elongate and then reach forward, and only ever stop where you're able to keep the body straight. So don't try to do this where you're bending forward to get that extra little bit. It's not going to help. It's actually where we end up tricking ourselves. So now that I talked about that, the stretch itself is essentially I'm going to reach down towards this knee, then come across towards this knee, and then I'm going to come up, and then I'm going to go again. It's going to essentially work in a circle. So doing it full out, I rotate and turn, so my lumbar is going to get a little bit of a spinal twist. And I'm going to reach forward towards my left knee, come across to my right knee, and then up. And I just keep doing that over and over again. And I do it around like 10 times usually, more if I'm like feeling I need to. It really depends on you and how much you need to stretch. But you'll feel this in particular work on one side of the glutes, especially if you can really get the stretch going. Like right now, because my left leg is on top, my left glute is getting more of the stretch. So it's very important to know that this is only one half. The other half, I switch legs. And then I go from here. Now, the full stretch is have one side. So if I have my right leg on top, I'll go around this way and this way. So go around this way about 10 times, and then go around this way about 10 times. Switch legs, do the same on the other side. This is to get both ways where the spine is twisting, as well as to get both glutes. So right now with my right leg on top, the right leg gets more of the stretch, or my right glute. So if you only do half, you'll have the same problem as you started. You'll have one glute stretched out more than the other, which will not fix your back issues. So that's the first exercise I want to show you guys, and my favorite for doing it. Another one is a little bit more common exercise. This one was called pigeon in my other Kung Fu teacher's class. So this one, as you can see, I have the same kind of leg position here as I was doing before, but this time I have my other leg pointed backwards. And if you can see my feet, let me adjust so maybe you can see it better. You can see my knee is pointed down, my toes are pointed back. So like this, it's pointed directly back in behind me. So the very important part to get in all of these stretches is this leg position here. And one thing to particularly watch out for is if this position here, if I lift up here, you can see if my leg can't quite make it to the floor, let's assume that I'm not as flexible as I am. If my knee can't quite make it to the floor, I may want to get like a pillow or a cushion and place it under here, because the important thing is that we want to get this leg position, but as we discussed with my fixing knee problems video about knee alignment and hip alignment, right? If I'm like this, and let's say like my weight is supported on this joint here, and my knee is positioned like this, it's gonna have the same problem where like my ankle, knee, and hip are not in a correct alignment for the weight transferred to the floor, which means that I'm going to essentially strain my knee along this area here, which is going to give us a problem as we're trying to fix one problem, we're going to get another problem. So if you aren't of the flexibility where you can make it on the floor, where your leg and your knee is resting on the floor, then put a cushion there until it is resting. And then as you get more flexible, get less and less cushion. So if you have like, let's say a yoga brick where you have this much to go, right? Then maybe dial it down, have like a cushion that's like this much, and then maybe like a blanket, and then until you're on the floor. But yeah, it's just important that you want your leg to be resting on the floor rather than like balancing, so we don't strain the knee. So, and then of course switch to the other side, right? So the way to get this stretch more, if I switch to this side, is that I want to get this hip as close to the floor as possible. And this leg, as you can see right now, I have my leg here where it's perpendicular to the way my body's angled. So I don't want it to go like this, where now you see my leg is going behind me, or rather underneath my hip, because here it lessens the stretch. So the more that I get this to be perpendicular to my body, then the more stretch I get. And then I want to push my hip towards my foot, or rather trying to get it on the ground as much as you can. And then let your body down. So again, like with the other stretch, we're trying to get our body to the floor. I don't want to bow down like this and convince myself I'm more flexible than I am. It's more an issue of getting the hip to touch the floor than it is to get the whole body to touch the floor. Only if this stays up while the rest of me goes down, then I'm not actually getting more out of the stretch. So I want to stretch my hip a little bit more, and that'll give a little bit more stretch into my right glute here. So those were the two stretches. So we have pigeon, which is the one I just showed, and then we have this exercise where we're moving around in a circle like this. So make sure the back is straight and not bowed, and make sure that the angle of the leg is resting comfortably. So right now, as you can see, my leg is completely resting on my other leg, where I'm not like straining like this. Always have like cushions underneath here as you up in flexibility, then you can lessen that. So this will help fix issues regarding imbalances in the glutes for the lower back. So as we review that discussion here, if the glutes are uneven, one will pull on the other, which will cause the coccyx to do this, and which will cause the spine to bow like that. So trying to get these to be even will cause everything to align straightly again. So that at least fixes that particular issue with the lower back. So I hope that this video is going to be helpful to you, and have a good day. Have a good practice.